this matters the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. I do.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
I'm going to ask if you would feel comfortable and believe you could safely and responsibly testify without a mask. That would be the preference if you're able to do that.
I would prefer to keep my mask on.
Very good. Then make sure, as it is now, that the microphone is very close to you. I understand, if I understood the title used in calling you, that you work in healthcare or have some relation to that industry. So as long as the jury can hear you, that would be fine. Thank you.
That is correct, Your Honor.
Go right ahead.
Good afternoon. If you could please state both your first and last name and spell both for the record, please.
My first name is Cori, C-O-R-I. My last name is Breslauer, B-R-E-S-L-A-U-E-R.
What do you do for a living?
I'm the Deputy Medical Examiner at the Dane County Medical Examiner's Office.
And that means you're an MD?
That is correct.
And you obviously went through some substantial training in order to become a deputy medical examiner.
That is correct.
I'm going to approach you now with Exhibit 363. Showing you what has been marked as Exhibit 363. Is this your curriculum vitae?
This is.
Okay. At this point, I would move Exhibit 363 into evidence.
No objection.
It is received.
So, doctor, where did you go to medical school?
I went to medical school at the University of Arizona College of Medicine in Phoenix, Arizona.
And then did you do a residency?
I did a residency in anatomic and clinical pathology at the University of North Carolina in Chapel Hill.
And what is pathology?
Pathology is a study of medicine that basically covers the effects of injury and disease on the body.
And are you board certified in any area?
I am board certified in anatomic pathology and in forensic pathology.
Now, what does it mean to be board certified?
Board certification means that I underwent an approved training program in the field that I'm certified in, and then I took a qualifying exam following that training and passed that exam.
And these are pretty extensive, several day-long exams.
That is correct.
And have you worked as a medical examiner at any location outside of the Dane County office?
I worked as a local medical examiner at the North Carolina office of the chief medical examiner in Raleigh, North Carolina.
And many careers like teachers, lawyers, have to go through continuing education. Is that something that doctors also have to go through?
Yes, it is.
And so you've attended trainings throughout your career as well?
Yes, the American Board of Pathology requires that I maintain my certification.
And you got involved in this investigation on July 8th of 2021, is that correct?
I believe so. I don't have my report in front of me.
Okay, well, fair enough. That's exactly what I was getting to.
Yes.
And you did write an official report in this case, is that fair?
I did.
And there was a typo in your first report, so you wrote, there's an amended report that basically eliminates one word.
The amended report reflects a correction of one typographical error.
Okay. I'm going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 364. Is this your amended report in this case?
This is my amended report with the triage notes from our office attached to the front.
All right, I would move Exhibit 364 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
It is received.
And also in preparation for testifying, as a team, we put together a PowerPoint, which I'm going to present in booklet form because of the sensitive nature of the photos, but is that true?
Yes.
And that is marked as Exhibit 366. And I just ask that you page through Exhibit 366 and make sure that that is the presentation that was put together.
This is the presentation.
And does that presentation, for the most part, it is just photos of the autopsy that you performed in this case?
That is correct.
Okay. At this time, I would move Exhibit 366 into evidence. And I also have 365, which is a digital copy, just for the record.
No
Any-
objection.
Oh, both are accepted into evidence.
And doctor, throughout the questioning, obviously, I'm going to have you looking at Exhibit 366. But if you also need to look at your report 364, that is fine. Just maybe note on the record when you were doing so and what pages.
Yes.
Just so we have a complete record here.
As the booklets are being distributed to the jury, I'll remind you that you should only turn pages when the witness is discussing the next page within the pamphlet. Obviously, you can turn back at any point. And again, we will advise you that observing these images is an important role as a juror, but studying these images is up to you personally as to the necessity that you feel to do so during the course of the testimony. Go ahead.
And doctor, obviously, you've worked as a medical examiner in various roles for several years. But is it fair to say you've performed hundreds of autopsies?
Yes, that is fair.
Okay. Obviously, you don't remember them all individually, thus you write reports.
That's correct.
Okay. So anytime you need to refer to your report, that is just fine. So how did you become involved in this case? Did you actually go to the scene on Erlewine Road where the torso was found?
I did go to the scene where the torso was found. The cases are brought to the office's attention by contacting our office. They first get triaged through our investigators who gather initial information, after which we are made aware of the scene, the suspicious nature, whether or not our presence is requested. I was notified that there was a scene, potentially suspicious scene, that my presence was requested at, and I then arrived at the scene with the investigator.
And why do medical examiners go to scenes?
Medical examiners goes to scenes because there is information that we can gather, circumstantial information based off of the position of the body, the environment that the body is found, and because my specialty is assessing the circumstances and the injuries that are found on the body, I'm able to assimilate all of that information.
So what did you do when you went to the Erlewine Road address? What did you just look around, take pictures, something else?
Once the scene was assessed to be safe for us to enter, we approached where the body was located. We looked at the environment that the body was in, and then photographs were taken at my direction by the investigator.
Then what did you do next?
So the body was underneath a considerable amount of brush and debris, and the layers of that brush and debris were removed, again, at my direction. And we then assessed the body as it was in its position.
And in all fairness, the brush and debris was kind of slowly removed, so each little process could be photographed. Is that
That's
fair?
correct.
Okay. At some point, was the torso removed and transferred back to your medical office?
It was under my direction.
Okay. And what does that mean, under your direction? Is there a certain procedure that you guys use?
There is. Once we look at the body as it is, we roll the body and look at all the sides. We photograph the body in multiple angles, and we then wrap the body in an evidence sheet. Usually, if the body is intact, we will bag the hands and the feet to protect evidence that may be there. In this case, there were no limbs for us to bag separately, but we did wrap the body in a sheet, placed it into a clean body bag, and then we transported it back to our office for further examination.
And back at your office, what, if any, sort of examination do you perform?
So back at the office, we have the resources, the lighting, and the tools available to perform a complete examination on the body, on the outside and the inside. We begin with an external exam where we look at the surfaces and the injuries and the markings of the body and document everything that we see with our eyes. Following that, and as well as collection of any evidence that we see. Following that, we then open the body and we examine the internal organs and any injuries that we see on the inside of the body and collect any specimens that we may need to evaluate later.
Do you x-ray the body?
We do.
And did that x-ray in this case help with identification?
It did.
And who was this torso? Who did you identify as it belonging to, or as it being?
Right, so we often evaluate bodies that come in without an identity, and so often they will come with a presumed identity. In this case, we were told that the presumed identity of the body was Bart Halderson. We received imaging x-rays of Bart Halderson that were taken while he was alive, and we then compared those to the x-rays that we took of the body that we had in our office, and I found multiple points of concordance that identified this body scientifically as Bart Halderson.
And did you folks also collect DNA from the torso?
We did.
I am going to show you what has been marked as Exhibit 372. And that's called a DNA spot card, is that correct?
That is correct.
And this appears to be the evidence envelope for Bart B. Halderson's DNA spot card.
That is correct.
And did you collect that DNA, or did somebody from the sheriff's office?
This would have been either myself or my team with my autopsy tech.
Okay. I'd move Exhibit 372 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
It is received.
Okay. Doctor, why don't we move on to page 2?
Folks, I want to tell you two things. If you look at the cover page, you'll see a small numeral in the bottom right-hand corner. All of the pages have those, and they're numbered. So if you were to lose your place, you could find out the next page by searching out those numbers in that corner. Unlike the presentations last week, this one doesn't work its way slowly into the process. I just wanted to alert you to that. Go ahead, Attorney Raymond.
That's correct. Doctor, could you please describe page 2 to the jury?
Page 2 is one part of a 3-part overall photograph of the torso, showing the lower half or inferior part.
And there's 2 circles on the right-hand side of this slide or this photo. What are those circles highlighting?
The circles on the right are highlighting the severed femurs of the body. Basically, the body was dismembered with the lower limbs removed, and the circles show the terminal ends of the femur bones.
And then there's a circle on the left side What is the circle on the left side of page 2 highlighting?
The circle on the left side of page 2 shows a gunshot wound.
Moving on to page 3. Could you please describe page 3 for the jury?
Page 3 is part 2 of a 3-panel overall showing the middle part of the body.
Okay, and a circle there again highlighting a gunshot wound?
That is correct. It is the same wound that is highlighted in the previous photograph.
And do you know yet in this part of your autopsy if that's an entrance wound or an exit wound?
Yes, this is an exit wound.
An exit wound?
Yes.
All right, so, and we'll get more into that. Does that mean, though, that, for lack of a better term, Mr. Halderson was shot in the back?
That is correct.
Moving on to page 4. What does page 4 show?
Page 4 is part 3 of a 3-panel overall showing the front half of the torso.
Okay, and again, there's 3 circles on the left side of that slide. Would you explain what those 3 circles are highlighting?
Yes, so the circles on the top and the bottom highlight the severed upper extremities and the terminal ends of the humeral bones. The circle on the left in the middle, in between those two, shows the neck or the base of the neck where the head has been severed.
All right, let's turn to slide 5. How would you describe slide 5 for the jury?
Slide 5 shows the posterior or back side of the torso. For orientation, the head, or where the head would be on the left side, and the feet would be on the right side.
Okay, how would you describe what the red circle is highlighting on the rightmost side?
The right circle is circling what I have labeled as gunshot wound number 1. It is an entrance gunshot wound.
Okay, and how would you describe the circle on the more left side?
The left side is also a gunshot entrance wound, which I describe as gunshot wound number 2.
And doctor, how can you tell if a wound is an entrance wound or an exit wound?
There are characteristics which support wounds being either entrance wounds or exit wounds. In place, an entrance wound typically has a round shape and an abrasion collar where the bullet abrades the skin as it enters the body. We can also find, depending on the range of fire, if the gun was fired at a close range to the body, we can sometimes find evidence of burned and unburned gunpowder particles, soot, and things like this.
Okay. Let's move on to slide 6. What is slide 6 showing?
Slide 6 is a closer view of the left-sided or superior or closer to the head gunshot entrance wound from the previous slide.
Okay. And were you able to, based on the characteristics, look at the surrounding area under a microscope?
That is correct.
And when you look at a wound or an entrance wound or whatever sort of wound under a microscope, what are you looking for?
So sometimes we can see soot with our eyes without any assistance because there's a black residue. However, in this case, there was decompositional artifact that obscured and discolored the areas. So what I did was I sampled 4 areas from each wound and looked at it under the microscope. And what that allowed me to see was microscopic evidence of soot that I could not see without the assistance of a microscope.
And based on, are you able to make any determinations based on amount of soot or whether soot is present or not?
I can comment on whether it was present or not in the pieces of tissue that I submitted. So I see a 2-dimensional plane of cells under the microscope, and in those pieces that I sampled, if it is present, then I can see that it's there. It appears as black granular debris deposited within the dermis, which is the second layer underneath the very surface of the skin. And if I don't see it, it does not necessarily mean it is not present at all. It only means that it was not present in the tissue that I sampled.
And what is the relationship between how far away a gun is from a person's skin and soot?
Typically, you're expecting a contact range gunshot if soot is seen.
All right, so if there's soot present.
Within inches.
That means within, I'm sorry.
Inches.
Inches, okay. And if soot is not present, what, if anything, does that tell you about the gun range in relationship to the victim's skin?
Yes, so that it can say a couple of things. It can say, if there is no soot, it can say that the range of fire was farther away and that there was too much distance for soot to make it to the body. It can also say that something could have been in the way that could have obstructed soot from making it to the body. So there could have been layers of clothing or a wall or a door or something obstructing soot making it to the body.
And when you looked at the wound that is pictured in slide 6, what, if any, evidence did you find of soot?
I did not find microscopic evidence of soot in this injury.
So what range do you put for this wound?
For this, I have indeterminate range because I do not have characteristics that can tell me what the range is.
So basically that means it could be feet instead of inches. Is that a fair way to say it?
It is. It means I do not know the range.
Okay. I'm going to turn to slide 7. What is pictured on slide 7?
Slide 7 is a metal fragment that was found in the wound track representing a fragment of projectile.
Okay. And during this autopsy, projectile fragments were turned over to the Dane County Sheriff's Office, is true, right?
Yes, that is correct.
But then you came across one later during the process of examining the bones.
Yes, so due to the sensitive nature of this case, our office retained the body in our cooler. I then re-examined the body later on in order to fully understand the wound tracts. Upon that second exam is when I found the additional fragment.
I'm going to show you Exhibit 555. And when you found that additional fragment, did you turn it over to the Sheriff's Office as well?
I did.
Okay. And on Exhibit 555, does that appear to be the label for the metal fragment that you turned over to Tim Blank from the Sheriff's Office?
Yes.
I'd move Exhibit 555 into evidence at this time.
No objection.
Thank you, it is received.
All right, turning now to slide 8. Could you please describe slide 8 for the jury?
Slide 8 represents, it's a similar photograph, but it highlights a different gunshot entrance wound.
Okay, the one that's more on the right or lower in the back.
That is correct. It is closer to the feet than the entrance wound that was previously discussed.
Okay, and flipping to slide 9.
Slide 9 is a close-up photograph of the entrance wound that was in the previous slide on slide 8.
And were you able to look microscopically for soot on this wound?
I did.
And this is wound number 1 in your report, I believe.
That is correct.
And were you able to determine what range or what distance the gun was from the skin based upon the microscopic findings?
There were granular particles within the dermis on microscopy of the tissue I submitted here that were consistent with soot. Therefore, I assessed that as a contact range gunshot entrance wound.
So there was soot on the skin?
Yes.
So contact range.
Correct.
And again, going from back to front.
Correct.
Slide 10.
Slide 10 shows the anterior or front surface of the body, and a gunshot exit wound is highlighted.
And is that the exit wound from shot 1 or shot 2?
That is the exit wound from gunshot wound number 1, the contact range gunshot wound.
All right. All right, and let's move to slide 11, please.
Slide 11 demonstrates a close-up of the slide 10,
Okay.
the exit gunshot wound from gunshot wound number 1.
And the shape there is just kind of showing that with exit wounds, you can't usually put them back perfectly together like you can an entrance wound.
That is correct. As we discussed, the characteristics of gunshot wounds that allow me to assess whether or not they are entrance or exit. Exit wounds tend to be irregular, and they tend to be able to reapproximate. And this is just showing that irregular margin of the exit wound on the anterior surface.
Slide number 12. What is slide number 12 highlighting?
Slide number 12 also shows an anterior version of the torso, and it is highlighting hemorrhage at the neck.
Okay. And there's like a ruler sticker there.
Yes.
What are you measuring there?
We use a label that has a scale on it that puts our unique identification number, so that every photograph that we take has that unique identification number, and that scale allows us to measure whatever is in the field that we are photographing.
And is this hemorrhage from the mutilation, or is this hemorrhage from a bullet?
The hemorrhage
Trajectory.
is surrounding the gunshot wounds.
Okay. And slide 13, please.
Slide 13 shows the base of the neck around the area of the right shoulder, and it is a ragged defect that is circled in the center right above that scale, and it represents a possible entry or exit for a third gunshot wound.
So there are at least 2 gunshot wounds, 1 and 2, that we discussed, in a possible third here.
Correct. We discussed 2 gunshot wounds, and then this is a third.
And were you able to look microscopically at this third gunshot wound?
I'm going to refer to my report.
Sure.
So on page 8 of 10, I have the descriptions of my histologic slides, and I submitted skin tissue only from the entrances and the exit previously discussed. I did not submit skin from this.
And is that partly because of the jagged nature, and it seems like there's more disruption to the skin?
That is correct. Additionally, the bullet material that was found directly underneath it, it's going to be impossible to tell if that represents the entirety of the wound track or if there is tissue missing because of the proximity to the severed head.
All right. Thank you. Exhibit 14, could you tell us what that slide exhibits?
Slide 14 is a portion of our posterior soft tissue dissection showing hemorrhage surrounding where I recovered the bullet fragments from the neck.
And then slide 15.
Slide 15 is jacket fragments and lead core fragments that were recovered from the neck.
Sorry, what was the second thing you said after jacket fragments?
So there's more than one part of a bullet. So there's the lead core of a bullet, and then there's the jacket that covers the bullet, and both are represented here.
It was the word lead I missed. Thank you.
Oh, yes.
Thank you.
Doctor, obviously the legs, the arms, and the head were removed from this torso. Is there any can you make any determination whether that disfigurement or dismemberment occurred before or after Bart Halderson died?
So one thing that helps us determine whether or not an injury occurred before or after death is the presence or absence of a vital reaction or hemorrhage. So we've been talking about me finding hemorrhage in areas of injury. In the areas where the gunshot entrances were, there was hemorrhage around it, indicating that the heart was beating when the individual shot. Where I recovered bullet fragments, there was hemorrhage or vital reaction surrounding that area. However, in the areas surrounding the dismembered limbs, or the head, the upper extremities, and the lower extremities, there were injuries, but I did not appreciate this vital reaction. I did not appreciate hemorrhage in the same way that I appreciated around the other injuries.
So the mutilation occurred after death.
That is correct.
Doctor, did you determine a cause of death for Bart Halderson?
I did.
And what was that cause of death?
As written on page 2 of my report, I determined the cause of death was gunshot wounds of the torso.
And did you determine a manner of death?
I did.
And what was the manner of death for Bart Halderson?
As I'm reading from page 2 of my report, I assessed that the manner of death was homicide.
Counsel, I believe page 16 of the booklet hasn't been discussed. And if you don't want to publish that page, that's fine, but I don't think I heard any testimony about that
Oh,
page.
I'm sorry. My pages were just sticking together. I apologize, everyone. Doctor, could you look at page 16?
Yes.
What does 16 show?
Page 16 is also a representation of the posterior back side of the torso around the area of the hip, or the right hip or the flank. This represents a small ligature furrow. When the body was found at the scene, there was a length of rope that was encircling the body, and this was the area corresponding to where the rope was likely rubbing against the body.
So that's a wound from the rope.
That's correct.
And do you know of the gunshot wounds? Do you know, were both of them fatal? Was just one of them fatal or something else?
I would say that they were all fatal.
No further questions.
Cross-examination.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
Let's just start there with the 3 gunshot wounds. There's no way for you to tell which happened first, second, or third, correct?
That is correct. So when I was talking about the vital reaction or the hemorrhage, I can say that something happened before or after someone died, but with rare exceptions, am I able to say the order that one happened over the other.
And in your report, you noted, I think you used the words, at least 3 gunshot wounds. Do you recall that?
Yes.
And why use the phrase "at least"?
So in this case, I have missing tissue. I have missing upper extremities, lower extremities, and a missing head. So in the portion of the remains that I received, there were 3 gunshot wounds, evidence of 3 gunshot wounds, but I cannot say whether or not that there are additional gunshot wounds that could be in tissue that is absent or that I don't have the ability to evaluate.
And because on the 3 you were able to evaluate, you did see evidence of this vital reaction, is it fair to say it's your opinion that the person was alive when these gunshot wounds happened?
Yes.
And if there were other gunshot wounds to other extremities that you weren't able to examine, you wouldn't be able to tell if those were the same, having vital reaction, or not having vital reaction, obviously.
If the remains are not available, I cannot tell.
Now, you did testify that the dismemberment happened post-mortem because there was no vital reaction, correct?
Correct.
Are you able to say how long after the person died that the dismemberment happened?
Not with any certainty or with very much accuracy. There are estimations I could make based off of the decomposition that I saw, I can say that my findings are consistent with the circumstances that were given to me, but that's about as far as I could comfortably say.
Now, on page 2 of the report, when you talk about manner of death, you'd already testified that it was ruled homicide, but then there's a bracket where you say shot by other, parentheses S, with unknown firearm. So other or others, there's nothing about your examination that can tell you how many people might have been involved in shooting this person, correct?
That is correct. Because there is more than one gunshot wound, and because I was not present, I cannot say whether or not those were inflicted by one or more firearms.
You can say it wasn't this person self-inflicting these wounds.
Yes.
And again, just so we're clear, unknown firearm, there's nothing about your examination that could tell you what firearm caused these shots, correct?
Correct. The characteristics of the injuries are not such that I can tell a caliber or a type of firearm.
Thank you, that's all I have.
Any redirect?
No, Your Honor.
May the doctor be excused.
They may.
I'll take your report. I think that's still there. Anything else that is with you? Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.
And we should collect the booklets that were utilized with the witness. Let me inquire, Attorney Raymond, who's next in the witness list? Okay. Folks, given the nature of the next testimony and the length of time, we've been here an hour, but it's also been an hour that was intense. So let's go ahead and take a break at this point for convenience, and we'll come back in 10 minutes and resume with the next witness. Thank you.
All right, for the jury.